Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. In this video, we are going to insert the fancy lace panel into the batiste rectangle of the front bodice. Now, I have already cut my rectangle of Imperial Batiste in half, marked it left and right. Okay, after I get that sewn in, I will cut the pattern piece by centering it on the fancy lace panel. And then lastly, I will insert the silk ribbon into the beading, and then we'll be ready to start on the shoulder seams. But we're going to start by inserting the lace panel into the batiste. So I'm going to start with the right side, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the bottom of my batiste about 1/4 of an inch below where I drew my blue line. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I create my seam, I want to make sure I have a full grid where the ribbon will be behind the beading. Okay, so I need to pin this. So let me get started on that. Okay, so I have that pinned into place. I've got my left side, my right side, and my word top is on the front top, so that I can make sure that when I insert the lace panel, that the front of the panel is actually to the outside of the garment. Now, I've got my machine set for a straight stitch, so I'm going to straight stitch each of these entredeux seams. Let me see if I can zoom in over here to the sewing machine and just stitch this entredeux to the batiste. Take my pins out as I come to them. You know, I've seen people try to do this just by holding it and not pinning it into place, but for me, I tend to have much better results if I pin things. And as I've said before, use lots of pins because pins are our friends. Just don't sew over them because you might break a needle or bend a pin. Or worst case scenario, you could bend the pin and it gets caught down in your bobbin housing, which would require perhaps a trip to the sewing machine repair shop. Okay, so I'm going to sew both of these seams on both sides, and then I will need to go to the ironing board and press my entredeux seam toward the batiste side of the bodice piece. So I'll be right back. Okay, I have been to the ironing board and I have pressed my batiste and entredeux seams towards the batiste rectangles. Now let me set my sewing machine to a zigzag and the appropriate stitch length and stitch width for sewing entredeux. And then I'm going to zigzag the entredeux seams into place. Let's see if I can zoom in again. Okay, so I'm going to be catching the fold of the fabric on the left and going in the entredeux hole on the right. So let me kind of get started. Make sure I'm going in the entredeux hole and not stabbing. There we go. I'm not stabbing the entredeux itself. since this is Imperial Batiste and not Swiss Batiste, it really does take a good pressing to get a nice crisp fold in the fabric. And that's because the Imperial Batiste has a little bit of polyester in it, which prevents it from wrinkling, you know, quite as much as Swiss Batiste will. So, but, you know, it has its downfalls also. Okay, so this will take me a minute to get both of these seams zigzagged into place. So I will be right back. Okay, so I have both of these seams zigzagged to finish them off. Now from the inside, I'm going to use my specialty scissors with the double bend in the shaft of the scissors and the blunt tips. And I'm going to trim away a little bit of this excess batiste from next to the entre-deux seam. Just kind of trim close to the zigzag line without actually cutting the fabric, which is going to be our bodice piece. And since I'm using these little scissors, which are not available at the big box stores, in the video description down below, I will put a link to where you can order some, because these are just perfect for lace work, entre-deux work, for heirloom sewing. And if you don't have a pair, at some point you may want to get yourself a pair if you begin to do this type of work. Okay, so just trim it kind of close to the zigzag and on both of the seams. So this will take me a minute to finish, so I'll be right back. Okay, mission accomplished. Okay, now I've got my pattern piece, so I'm going to center my pattern piece on the fancy lace panel. Line it up. You see where the ribbon will be on the outside of the beading. I'm going to line that up with the bottom edge of that. And then as I check my pattern piece, it is centered. So let me just adjust it just a hair more. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pin my pattern piece into place, and then I will use my fabric cutting scissors and cut the bodice out. Okay, so it's pinned into place. So I will use my fabric cutting scissors and cut this out now. Okay, so I've got my bodice pattern piece cut out, and I have woven in one piece of the green silk ribbon, and I need to weave in the second piece, but this will take me a little bit of a hot minute to get this done. Because it's just kind of slow going. So let me measure about how much ribbon that I need. So I think that'll be enough. And then I will just start weaving the ribbon into the little beading holes. Sometimes I have to use my seam ripper to grab the edge of the ribbon and bring it through, keeping it from twisting, I hope. Okay, so that will be about the same length as the other one. Okay, so it will take me a minute to get this other piece of silk ribbon woven in. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got both pieces of ribbon woven in. Now what I did over here on the right side was I wove it through the beading hole that's actually cut, and with a needle and thread I simply tacked it into place. So on this other side I'm going to weave the ribbon into the hole that was cut when I cut the neckline. And once again, just right up here at the top, I'm going to, with a couple of stitches, I'm going to tack this ribbon into place. Whoops, came through the ribbon. Okay, just, kind of do a couple of little stitches within the seam allowance, which is about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. And that way, that ribbon won't get wonky when we put the neckline on. There. Okay. All right, so now we are ready to begin sewing the shoulder seams, but we'll do that in the next video. But in this video, we were inserting the fancy lace panel into the batiste rectangle. We cut the pattern piece out, making and notice that when we constructed it, we made sure that everything was symmetrical. So the beading, the ribbon in the beading matches up going up, same with the motifs on the laces. Now, I like this beading because if you'll notice on the wide Swiss insertion at the center, it's got a little grid style entredot. And this Swiss beading has the grid in it also. So I think that that makes the beading play off of itself really, really nicely. But like I said, inserting the panel was what we were doing today. Cutting the pattern piece out and weaving the silk ribbon in. Okay, thank you.